Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast UX Design to Win in Business. My name is Nils. I'm a co-founder here at Dingy at a UX agency based in Europe, I would say. It's always a little bit different how I introduce ourselves, but we're a remote team and mainly in Central European timing zone. So today I want to talk a little bit about a more concrete example of how to see the business value in user experience design. So in the past episodes, if you listen to any of those, I'm talking a lot about theoretic constructs on how UX design makes sense, where to apply it, what it entails in general in your organization. But today I want to, just because we have an exciting project that we're working on, I want to share a little bit from this project, as much as I can say. So it's still in development, so I don't want to go ahead and disclose any secrets. But so we've recently picked up a project for SumUp. They built these little car terminals that you might have seen all across Europe. They also expanded into the US, into South America, are like a relatively big, it's not a startup anymore. I know them from back then, 10 years ago, but by now it's a huge organization. And we got called in to support a new app project with the overarching UX design and feature design. And I'm excited about this project because it really ties together everything I've been talking about so far on the podcast. But let's take it step by step. So SumUp has hardware products, like you get like a little card reader that either connects with your phone or is standalone. But they build they have this very modern user experience with card payments in general. And they're really always on, I would say, on the edge of the newest things possible there. So the latest feature release, for example, is that you don't even need a terminal at all anymore. You can just have the SumUp app on your phone, and your customers can either hold like their plastic card with an NFC chip onto your phone and pay like that, like tap to pay, but just on your phone. Or of course also Apple Pay, like then you can hold like two phones together, and then you as the merchant who's selling something has the SumUp app on here and somebody can pay you. And so all sorts of things like that. And while the hardware is great, the software that goes with it has to be very nice too, of course. And I think they are doing a great job at this since always. Like the user experience for the merchants running their business, having to deal with card payments is, I think, as good as it can be, I suppose. And so this is, I think, an interesting thing to go into, to be called into to help with user experience, because they have so much design already, right? Like, of course, they have like a visual brand guide. In SumUp's case, they even have an open source UI design library with all of the colors and all of the spacing tokens and like little components for buttons and inputs and all sorts of guidelines on how to put them together as an app. And that system is called Circuit UI. You can check it out. It's even open sourced. And so to do UX design for a company like that, I think it really surfaces the value of UX itself, because they have a lot of programmers, of course, like they have web developers, they have a huge design team, they have all of the basics figured out. And our job in this thing is to help the team build an app for a relatively specific internal group of stakeholders. So I can't really say exactly who they are, but this project is somewhere in the middle of B2C and B2B. So it's neither for the customers that are actually like the merchants running a business, taking card payments, nor is it for the internal staff necessarily, but the two stakeholder groups that are important consumers of the app that we're building. First of all, on the one side, it's the business internally. So for SumUp itself, we're talking about to help scale an operation. And for the actual users of the app, we're trying to make their job a lot easier because currently involves spreadsheets, manual processes, sending emails, all sort of things. And they actually don't have so much time to do all of these manual processes. So let's talk a little bit about the team setup on how we're doing all of this. So from Dingy's perspective, most of us are somehow involved in the team right away. And that includes UI design, UX concept, front-end development, and everything we have to offer in user experience research. And I think the team setup is really interesting, so I want to talk about that for a little bit more. So SumUp has this style of organizing teams where it's not, you don't have your development team and they have a manager, and then there's the designer team and they have a manager, and then there's, like all of these silos and they kind of have to work together. But they follow this sort of tribal organization where all the skills that you need to fulfill one project come together in one newly formed team. And because that is the case, and because projects start and finish, people inside of SumUp are moving around a lot, like from here to there, and the teams are being put together in new ways to support new projects. And in our case, we have a team of 6-ish around that. So we have 2 full stack developers, we have 2 front-end engineers, like one of them really more being like a design engineer. Then we have the design engineer being also the UI designer, so to say. And then we also have a UX researcher, right, integrated and managed by a product manager and an engineering manager, who take part in the sprint plannings, in the sprint refinements. So we work in 2-week sprints, but we're all together in the same thing. And while it might sound a little bit chaotic and unmanageable, I want to make the case that this is, I think, the only real way to a successful project. And I'm going to tell you why. So in my previous experiences, when we were hired as a consultant to come into an existing team or an existing organization that had different teams to help out with UX design, then we were always the ones sort of outside 2 or 3 teams, namely the designers, the developers, and then usually marketing or something. But like those teams, like they knew of each other, of course, and of course they talk to each other, but like they are all in different places. Like they all have their different style of getting work done. So development would usually work in sprints, and design and marketing, they had, I don't know if they even have task boards, but like they organize themselves in different ways and thus automatically have a different pace of work. And through a different pace of work and through different self-organization, the expectations are also different from how the other side works and how to get something from them that you need to progress in your project. And in this case, in our organization, we have everyone on the same Kanban board, on the same team, attending the same meetings and working in the same 2-week cycle. And in those 2-week cycles, it happens, of course, that we're working on different features, for example. So we're not all in these 2 weeks, we're not all finishing from start to end the same thing and then we all move on to the next. So I see it more like a moving window in which we're kind of giving the other person the task from one hand to the next, kind of handing over, but in a dynamic way. So I guess other people call this like the hot potato method. And I think this is like a really beautiful picture because we're all kind of juggling around with the hot potato and are throwing it over to the next person, and that person throws it back, and then it goes in a circle and comes back to you. But what that leads to is that everybody is always in the know of what's going on, and everybody has enough knowledge to always give valuable feedback. So to describe maybe how we work on one feature in this integrated team that might sound a little bit chaotic. So there's like a loose set of requirements from stakeholders. There's like a feature idea, usually originates out of something like there's a manual process inside the business that won't scale if this has like 10x the consumers than it has now. That could be one thing. Then the other side of the users who actually have to get stuff done using this app, they have like a manual process and they keeps them from successfully doing their job throughout the day. And so there's usually some sort of problem to be solved. And so with this, we start to write down like the first draft of a ticket saying, all right, so this feature should solve for this problem. And the problem is this and that and this and that. And we have to make sure that going out of this feature, the following X points are not manual anymore and can be automated. And while we're at it, we also want to make sure that we're presenting whatever comes out of this feature in a much easier way to consume and to work with than it is currently. Because currently, imagine people putting spreadsheets together manually and then other people looking at them. So like this is what we're trying to make a lot better with an integrated app that does these things automatically. So, and with this first description, we would usually move into a wireframing phase where we quickly put together a wireframe of like one or two different routes on how we could see this problem being solved through a UI, through a feature. But since SumUp has very nice and easy to work with UI design system, Circuit UI, we can skip wireframing phase and just go on Figma to make a wireframe, but like a first UI concept right away with the real components. And I gotta say, it really helps user testing because it looks like the real thing. Like you don't really know that you're looking at a prototype if you're, not an app developer or anything. So it makes the product very real. And so we actually get better feedback or have to explain less than we would have to do if we wireframe. And so we bang out like this first concept, get feedback from internal stakeholders who know the pain that we're trying to solve a little bit better, and we revise the design. While we're working on this design, we're not doing this in a silo, like we're pasting the links for the clickable prototype into our joint engineering channel, into the project channel on Slack, and everyone will go in and look at it, at least look at it and be in the know of what's coming down the road to implement in the next couple of weeks. But we'll also give you feedback because we really told the entire team, hey, it doesn't matter if you're the consumer of this feature, you're a human being, you have common sense, you know the company, please go in and tell us if this will work from your perspective. And so everything is very transparent, and the same goes the other way around. So design is transparent with engineering. Engineering is implementing features, is fixing bugs. All of that stuff is also not in a silo, but very visible for the product manager, for the designers, even for the UX researcher. And that is a great point too, because it already happened often that something that seemed to be a technical bug that was going wrong was picked up by the UX researcher who said, well, I actually think this is somebody using the app in the wrong way because they misunderstand how this is supposed to go. And there's usually like a technical side there's something to be done in coding to make the feature better, to make the bug go away. But we often had the case that the UX researcher would go to one of the users, quickly ask them about how this came about and to really understand the root cause of why they were using the app this way, and could come back with feedback in like a matter of an hour or two, which would absolutely help, first of all, the engineers to understand how this issue comes, like how it is produced, so to say, like what do the people do to actually produce this error. And all the while, the designers in the project can also follow this conversation and take a learning to not repeat this sort of pattern or this sort of usability issue in future features that they're designing. And so I really believe that putting the people together requires everyone on the team to communicate well and often. Like it feels like the Slack channel is, well, it's not super busy or anything. It's not like, hashtag random in a huge organization with posts every second, but it's a busy channel. Like you kind of have the job to follow up with what's going on. stay in the know, because only that way, if you don't have to explain to everyone all the time what you're doing, you can go into a meeting and expect people to sort of know where you are and thus not waste time with huge intros and knowledge transfer and come to a really good feature. Like if we're at a place where we already did user testing for a prototype, like a clickable prototype, and we know that we're close to the design being finished, then the engineers always look at this process already and kind of ask around which parts of the feature might be already okay to build. And there's so much opportunity in doing that and not waiting around for everything in design to be finished, because usually there's a lot to be done that is not necessarily even building the UI. There's like backend services that have to be scaffolded or put together, or you have to make sure that you can create this and that sort of data on the database. And all of that stuff is not going to be changed during user testing. Like if we're at like a 70% confidence level that the design or like the functionality of this feature will stay roughly like this, then engineering can get going already, and we can work together to understand that they're building the right foundation for the feature while improving the design. And so I'm really, really happy that SumUp is organized the way that it is, and that we get the opportunity to dive in a really competent and striving team to help build like this app with a couple of features that alleviate problems that just keep everyone from working right now. Like it feels great to have consumers of an app being excited about the project, asking you for features, understanding when they can even get like the new version and be even more productive at their jobs. So this is really nice to see, but it's also a challenging thing because it has to do with expectation management. It has to do with getting the feature right the first time as much as possible, because you can really see if you have 500 people waiting for you to release this new feature, and assuming you didn't do your user research and you just, went this old school route of, well, we know the business requirements, we know the problem that we're solving, so we're pretty sure that we're going to solve it the right way, to release the feature, to then get the feedback that this is weird, people don't understand it, there's actually something missing, what about this edge case? All of the stuff that, as I'm always saying on this podcast, you will only know if you talk to your users, whoever are the users, if you talk to internal stakeholders, if you get the feedback early, and if you iterate on the designs before you move into implementation phase. And so to really drive this point home, during this project, the design or like the entire concept, until we're sort of sure what we're building, it's like a back and forth. It's like really in short time spans, asking for this, getting feedback here, reiterating there. Like currently we're with a team of 6 building 4 features at the same time. And that's not because it's chaos, but that's because we're moving in parallel, and we're kind of while we're doing it, we're figuring out what's needed from a technical perspective to make each of those features work. And each of those features has a little bit of a different group of consumers who are differently available for user research. So we decided to go in parallel with feature development to always be able to push on one front. The one that is currently moving the furthest will probably be done the first, but we're not trying to get this one feature done, and only if this is done we can start with the next one, because that's too inflexible for this project. Anyway, I hope you could take something from me sharing about this project. I'm probably gonna talk about it a little bit more because it's a really, really exciting opportunity for us to be able to work on such an important app for SumUp. And I'm also going to share insights from another very interesting project that we're working on right now, which is an entirely different ballpark. And I'm very looking forward to sharing that with you on the podcast as well. Yeah. And with this, thank you for listening. See you on the next one.